Perfect. Hey, good afternoon and welcome to Cleveland Cliffs Steelton. My name is Clifford Smith. I'm Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Cleveland Cliffs. I'd like to emphasize what an honor it is to host Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg today. Welcome again. And Governor Josh Shapiro.
Thank you.
To our facility. Thank you very much for stopping by today. Secretary Buttigieg, we are pleased to host you at Cleveland Cliffs Toledo Direct Reduction Plant in the fall of 2022 for the announcement of President Biden's Clean Steel initiatives. Today is another great opportunity to highlight the role of Cleveland Cliffs and its USW workforce in supporting the critical infrastructure of the United States. And we've talked about Steelton being founded in 1865, the oldest continuously operated steel mill in the United States of America. Today, Steelton and its skilled workers from the United Steelworkers Local 1688 produce rail, merchant bar, ingots, cast blooms, among other steel products. American-made steel rail produced in this mill is utilized by Class I railroads and by major rail transit systems, including Washington Metro, New York City Transit, Chicago Transit Authority, and SEPTA in the Philadelphia metro area, just to name a few. We also produce crane rail that helps to sustain and modernize our seaports, shipyards, and is used in a lot of sporting venues for retractable roofs. In addition, serving these critical infrastructure applications, Steelton is uniquely capable of producing heavy forgings used in propulsion systems for the United States Navy, ships and submarines, thus directly supporting national defense. Since acquiring this mill in December of 2020, Cleveland Cliffs has made significant investments and added over 150 additional workers, and we're poised to take advantage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act. I'd like to recognize our local leadership here at Steelton, including General Manager Bill Carlisle, there you go, and LaRue Hess, President of our local 1688, there we go, in the back. Now, please join me in welcoming Delisa Baldwin to the podium. Delisa is a USW worker here at Steelton who has been employed at the mill for 5 years. She is a member of the USW Women of Steel and Civil Rights Committee, and Delisa will share her perspective on what it means to be a USW member. Thank you.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Thank you, Mr. Smith, for that wonderful introduction. Before we move forward, I would like to share one more personal note. I am also a very proud mother of 2 amazing children, Eli and Sunny, who both bring so much pride and joy into my life. Working as a steel worker for Cleveland Cliffs has been a true blessing for our family. Because of the robust collective bargaining agreement that was negotiated by my union, USW, my husband and I are able to provide for our family with opportunities and the lifestyle that they deserve. But let's shift the focus away from me, because today I have the honor of introducing not one, but 2 esteemed guests that we have in our presence today. At this time, I'd like to take a moment and shine a spotlight on some key accomplishments from the careers of both the United States Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, and the Governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. Secretary Buttigieg is a true champion of American workers. From the moment he was sworn into office in 2021, he began fighting to pass the Biden administration's sweeping historic infrastructure plan. That plan became a reality in November of that year, delivering tens of thousands of good jobs and transforming our country and our workplaces. Thanks to his leadership, we've seen some of the most significant improvements in U.S. transportation infrastructure in over half a century. The Secretary has also led the way in shoring up our supply chains in the wake of the pandemic, cutting the congestion at some of our largest ports to make sure that we get the goods we need. For the past 3 years, he has been one of the most effective advocates in Washington, D.C., fighting for good jobs, strong supply chains, and a better, stronger nation for us all. Let's shift now to Governor Josh Shapiro. Here in Pennsylvania, we are lucky to have a friend of workers like we have in Governor Shapiro. Since he took office as governor, Josh Shapiro has focused on expanding employment and training workers for jobs for the future, jobs that will support families, send kids to college, and allow workers to retire with dignity. Brothers and sisters, siblings and friends, please join us in warmly welcoming Governor Josh Shapiro. Thank you.
Great job. Great job. How's everybody doing today? It is so good to be with all of you, and let me begin by saying to Delisa, a third-generation steel worker, a woman of steel, thank you for your leadership. I see many of the leaders of the Steelworkers Union who are here, and I know they are damn proud of you. The work that you do here in this facility every day, and the incredible way that you represent these amazing workers day in and day out, and the way you just did here in highlighting our special guest, Secretary Pete Buttigieg. So thank you so much for your leadership. We appreciate you. And let me just say a special thanks to our PennDOT Secretary, Mike Carroll, an unbelievable leader here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Proud that you are a leading member of our cabinet. We are, of course, here in Steelton with our great mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for welcoming us here. And thanks for bringing your neighbor next door, Mayor Williams from Harrisburg. It's awesome to see her, your county commissioner, Commissioner Douglas. And let me say it's nice to have a neighboring rep and Representative Fleming, but I got to say a special thanks to Representative Madsen. He has been saying for months and months and months, get on over to the Cliffs Steel plant. Representative Madsen, you're doing a hell of a job up the road in the Capitol, and you never forget where you came from. You never forget your communities. Thank you for your leadership, my friend. Appreciate you. Cliff, it is awesome to be with you and your leaders here. I guess you were around 150 years ago when they named this place after you. And we appreciate you, Lorenzo, the great leaders, and the way you value workers here in Pennsylvania, and particularly here in Steelton. You know, this mill, Mr. Secretary, has been around for over 150 years, providing great jobs for the good people of Pennsylvania and forging the steel that has literally built this great nation, from the Golden Gate Bridge to some of the Navy's top submarines. And Mr. Secretary, I know you know this because you spent a lot of time here in Pennsylvania. That's our legacy here in Pennsylvania. Our Commonwealth steel mills and our coal mines and workers like those who are here and those you represent, they literally built this nation. They helped lead the Industrial Revolution. They created good jobs. They lifted people out of poverty, and they helped start the modern day American labor movement. It has been American and Pennsylvania labor that has built this country. And when fascism threatened freedom overseas, it was our Commonwealth, it was Pennsylvania and our workers. It was the home of the arsenal of democracy and the most powerful manufacturing base in the world. And through it all, it was the workers of Pennsylvania that made that possible. We have always been, and we still are, a people-powered economy. And we are leading the way here in 2024 as we rebuild this nation's infrastructure and as we prepare for the next generation. We've shown here in the Commonwealth we can do big things, particularly when Pennsylvania union workers are involved. Hell, it was Mike Carroll literally living in his truck for 12 days in Northeast Philadelphia along I-95 when it was union workers that helped rebuild that roadway in less than 2 weeks after they told us it would take months and months and months. And I would note, it was a Cleveland Cliffs steel plant that helped forge the steel that was used to rebuild I-95. I cite that because that was an important infrastructure project, important for a whole bunch of reasons. But it was important because it highlighted the strong partnership that Pennsylvania has with Secretary Pete Buttigieg and President Biden. They were our partners in that effort to rebuild I-95. And they are our partners every single day as we repair and rebuild and build out the infrastructure of this Commonwealth. Thanks to their help and their investment, just last year alone in Pennsylvania, we repaired over 7,000 miles of Pennsylvania roadways. That's nearly 1,000 more than the year before. Just this spring, we drove out $204 million to bring high-speed internet to more than 100,000 Pennsylvanians in 42 counties. That doesn't happen without the commitment of Secretary Buttigieg and President Biden to invest here in Pennsylvania. You know that attitude I talk about every day, that chip on our shoulder we have here in Pennsylvania, the way we're governed by 3 letters, GSD. We focus on getting stuff done. Well, we don't get stuff done without this incredible partnership with our federal government and with President Biden. We're doing big things again in Pennsylvania. Just take a look at this mill right here in Steelton. It's one of 3 manufacturers of railroad rails in the country. It produced some of the highest strength and highest performance steel for rail on the planet. Steel from this mill, it's used in our subways and our trolley lines from New York to Chicago. It's used in our ports to support those giant cranes that you see, including in Philadelphia, and our ships and our submarines to protect our freedom all around the globe. It's the hands of Pennsylvania workers right here at Cleveland Cliffs that does that important work. And we are able to do this important work with the investments we're making through the Commonwealth and, of course, the investments we're making at the federal level. Thanks to great champions like President Biden, Secretary Buttigieg, and, of course, Senator Casey, who's led the way for years and years and years in the U.S. Senate to make sure Pennsylvania gets more than its fair share. Look, right now, I think we have a real opportunity to build the future of this country thanks to the historic investments that Secretary Buttigieg and President Biden negotiated in a divided Congress to make sure we got the resources to build America's future and make it brighter. I want you to know that those dollars aren't just checks that get written to some ledger. This is real change in people's lives. Go out to Esplin, out in the western part of our state. You'll see people ripping up the road and putting new pipes in. You know why they're putting new pipes in? Because for generations, kids have been forced to drink water out of those lines that contain lead. By the way, Esplin is a predominantly African-American community, a community that's been forgotten for too many years, until Secretary Pete and President Biden came along. They said no longer should we allow children to live that way. So yeah, there's real dollars flowing, but there's meaningful and impactful change that's coming. Parents are going to be able to educate their kids better and start a small business because they're finally going to be connected to the internet, creating thousands of jobs as we rebuild our infrastructure, thanks to the work these guys did in Washington, D.C. This stuff matters. It is real, and it's making a difference. And it's making a difference because those dollars get matched up with Pennsylvania workers who can go out and who can do this hard work every single day. I couldn't be prouder to serve as governor of Pennsylvania, but I know the progress we're making is in many ways due to the incredible partnerships we have at the federal level. And one of those great partners to me is Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Y'all know before he was Secretary Pete, he was Mayor Pete. He was a guy on the ground in South Bend, Indiana, who saw the impact of his work every day because he walked down the streets in his neighborhood, because he ate at the local diner and folks chatted him up, because he saw that when you passed a budget, it wasn't just a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet. It was a statement of principles and priorities, and his principles, his priorities, the principles and priorities of the president are making sure we look out for regular folks in this country, especially here in Pennsylvania, and we rebuild our infrastructure. He's taken that view he had as mayor, that view he had that government could be a positive, progressive, tangible force in people's lives, And he's never forgotten about that, even though he's in this big, critically important position now in our nation's capital. He is delivering for us every day and making sure that in our people-powered economy here in Pennsylvania, the people feel these investments. From here at a steel plant in Steelton, all the way across this Commonwealth, on our roads, on our rails, in our pipelines, and in our broadband lines. This is a guy who gets it. He's never forgotten where he's come from, and I'll always welcome him back to Pennsylvania to make sure he delivers for our Commonwealth and focuses on our workforce. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our nation's Secretary of Transportation, Mayor Pete, Secretary Pete, my friend, Secretary Pete Buttigieg.
Governor, thank you. Thank you, Governor, first of all, for the warm welcome. And I think you all know this, but you are fortunate in Pennsylvania to be led by a governor who understands that the highest use of the highest office in this Commonwealth is to make everyday life better through the tools, the resources, the authorities, and the dollars that are made available, both through his leadership, in partnership with the legislators who are here, and through his partnership with President Biden, departments like mine, and this entire administration. When you have state leadership, when you have a governor like Josh Shapiro who understands the importance of infrastructure in its bearing on everyday life, everything gets better and anything is possible, and we are so thankful to have that partner here in Pennsylvania. So, Governor, thank you for everything you do with us.
Thank you.
I appreciate all the leaders who are here, state leaders, county leaders, mayors. Thank you, Steelton Mayor Sierra Dent, for welcoming us here. Thank you, Williams. Looking forward to checking out your airport in a little bit. I admire you so much because the job of mayor has only become more demanding since I proudly wore that title. Although it would have been nice back when I was mayor if there was $1 trillion infrastructure bill going on to help me get things done. So we got that going for you. We aim to be a wind at your back. I want to thank Cleveland Cliffs for hosting us. Thank you, Clifford Smith, for welcoming us here. Thank you, Bill, for the great tour, and to your entire team here for the extraordinary work. And thank you, Delisa, not just for the introduction, but for the work and the workers you represent, the women of steel and the steel workers who make this country what it is. I'm so thankful to all of the steel workers leadership here for, among other things, helping us make the case to get this infrastructure bill done in the first place, which is now yielding these benefits for workers every day. President Biden's been very clear. American-made steel produced by union workers is the backbone of our economy, and thanks to the president's leadership, we are investing in American-made materials and American workers like never before in my lifetime. That's why I'm so excited to be here. And I do take this work personally because I'm a son of the industrial Midwest. I grew up in a community still recovering from what had happened to the auto industry there a half century before I became mayor, and saw that the rebirth of American leadership and the rebirth of American industry could yield great things. And the historic bipartisan infrastructure law that President Biden signed, got passed with the help of Pennsylvania's federal delegation, has made a huge difference. I remember the first trip that I took, or one of the first trips as secretary, was to Pittsburgh with Senator Casey to help make the case for this infrastructure package, something previous administrations promised and tried and failed to do, but has now launched our country into the midst of an infrastructure decade, investing, yes, in our roads and bridges and airports, but more than that, investing in the people who make them, the people who transport these goods to the job site, the people who physically construct the infrastructure we count on. That's why it matters to be in the midst of the biggest effort since the Eisenhower administration to update our infrastructure. Whether it's major upgrades to I-376 in Pittsburgh, that includes updates to 10 bridges in that area, or signals and tracks being improved between Pittsburgh and Harrisburg, whether it's the Lehigh Valley International Airport, where I got to join the community and the governor to celebrate the new work done there to make a better experience for air passengers, the work I'll see later today in Harrisburg, or the work I saw earlier today in Lancaster to save lives through $12 million in a Safe Streets for All grant that's going to help them reimagine their streetscape under the mayor's leadership. All of this is going on, and as it does, we're doubling down on making sure that funding flows right back into U.S. communities with American-made steel in American infrastructure projects built by American workers. And it couldn't come soon enough, because for too long, competitors, especially the Chinese government, subsidized the overproduction of steel, creating artificially low-priced materials that are also made by some of the most carbon pollution-intensive processes. The exact opposite of what I got to see with the BRI facility that we were at in Toledo not long ago. We're not going to allow our high-quality, low-pollution steel to be undercut anymore. President Biden has been clear about that, and that is why he tripled the tariff rates on any steel imported from China. Of course, we recognize that this is a story that's over a century in the making. Here where we stand, workers have been showing up for 150 years. They built the railroad expansion that knitted America together in the 19th century. They organized and secured the hard-earned wages and benefits that built a strong middle class in the 20th century, and now they are powering the infrastructure future for the 21st century and even the 22nd century that I expect my son and daughter will experience for themselves. We just had a great visit around the facility. I talked with Bill and with workers who can at a glance from 100 yards know the difference between a rail that's going to Norfolk Southern, a rail that's going to WMATA that I'm going to wind up on the Red Line on one of these days, and one that's going into some of those on-dock rail facilities that we're funding at places like the Port of Long Beach or Wilmington, Delaware. We are seeing right around us what it actually looks like to make these investments. And what's going on here proves that a facility that goes back almost to the Civil War can also be a center of innovation. It's the first facility in the country to exclusively produce steel, and now is at the forefront of some of the advanced methods that emit so much less carbon pollution than anything coming in from China does. It's the kind of innovation that would have served my hometown of South Bend well. This facility is showing how to write a better story and multiply the possibilities for economic growth. And as the governor said, what's important about these sums, these dollars, these policies that are going forward isn't how many commas or how many zeros are in them. It's how many presents under the tree, how many cars and trucks in the driveway, how many homes owned and children educated will be possible for families supported by the good-paying jobs and the supply chains that we are strengthening right now. Every time somebody boards a subway or streetcar or rail car riding on rails built with Steelton steel, they are better off and safer because of the quality of what you do here. And speaking as a former Navy officer, although I did counterterrorism, was one of those Navy officers who somehow managed to never wind up on a ship. They kept sending me to landlocked places. But it means a lot to me to know what this facility does to create steel that is used in naval vessels all over the world. And we're just getting warmed up. We're at the outset of this infrastructure decade, generating infrastructure that will give a generation of workers pride in being able to look at things from a streetcar in Santa Ana to a Brightline train in Miami to the retractable roof over the Raiders Stadium in Las Vegas, which I know is constructed out of that steel, and say, I built that. Your kids and your great-grandkids will know that you made transportation safer, more resilient, and more reliable, and I'm so glad I could hear to see for myself, tell the country, and report back to the President of the United States the extraordinary work that you do here every day. Thanks so much for having us, and thanks for the great work. I believe we have time for a couple of media questions. My colleague Alexandra will quarterback that.
I realize you're both here in your current respective roles today, but I can't help myself. Strikes me that I'm looking at two possible very early front runners for the 2028 Democratic nomination. Just wondering if you could both, and I'm not going to ask you a question I know you're not going to answer, but just wondering if you could talk about how what you're doing today matters for whatever everybody's future ambitions might be.
Well, all I can say is that any job I've ever had, I've known the most important thing is to do that job well. And what we have right now is a moment on our hands where the president has asked our department to deliver a level of investment that's not happened in my lifetime. That's taking roughly 110% of my talents and attention. And I'm humbled and proud to be able to do that every day. I've already got a job and we've already got a president, but I'm proud to be out here doing that work.
Mr. Secretary, we know that among the $1.6 trillion that's been invested by the administration, a lot of that hasn't been fully realized just yet. What should the folks know about what's potentially coming down the pike in the future for some of this money that is still waiting to be distributed?
Yeah, this is a 5-year bill, and we're smack at the middle of it because we're in the middle of the 3rd year. So we're very much in the phase of identifying and assigning the dollars, developing the programs, but increasingly seeing those dollars turn into specific projects selected and seeing dirt fly on those projects. And it's not possible without the partnerships that we have. We amass the funding, we align the policies, but it's down to teams like the team led by Secretary Carroll on behalf of Governor Shapiro, who are doing the excellent work day in, day out of getting everything from a port improvement to an airport terminal to an electric car charger put in where it needs to be put in. And that is the work of an entire decade. But what's exciting is even before the project is done, it is already bringing benefits. The ultimate benefit is when you drive across that better bridge or you check in at that better airport or you ride on that better rail. But even before that's done, it's already bringing benefits in the form of the good-paying jobs of the people who get to work on it. And that's one of the reasons I'm so proud to be with our union workers today here in Steelton.
All right, we'll do 2 more quick ones.
Secretary, can you talk about what's at risk if the election perhaps doesn't go the way that the administration might want it to see, especially as it pertains to workers in a state like Pennsylvania, where right now some polls are showing the president trailing the former president and his challenger?
Well, I can't talk campaigns and elections while I'm in this capacity, but what I will say is this. We talk about the infrastructure package like it couldn't have been any other way, but we had to fight for that. And there were a lot of folks who wouldn't do it. The political obituary of that bill was written over and over again before it was finally passed and President Biden finally signed it. And we know even as we speak that there are often congressional Republicans seeking to talking about clawing back infrastructure dollars or seeking budget cuts that would mean we could do less, including in some of our rail programs, which are still funded on a year-to-year basis, that are some of the programs buying some of the very rails you see behind me, built by some of the very workers who are here. So we are all in as an administration, as a matter of policy, on continuing this historic investment because it's the right thing to do for workers and because we just need that work. And I would defer to the governor for his views on this, but I certainly think we can't ever take for granted that this infrastructure moment will continue unless we keep pushing. Governor?
Yeah. Let me just say, I'm not constrained by the same rules of diplomacy that the Secretary is. Let me be really clear about something. We stand to be the leader here in Pennsylvania when it comes to clean energy because we landed not just 1, but 2 regional hydrogen hubs thanks to President Biden. You see the incredible work that's happening here in Steelton at a place like Cleveland Cliffs. Imagine that happening in other areas all across Pennsylvania. We've got 270,000 homes and businesses that do not have high-speed internet right now, but we've now got the resources from the president to connect all of them. I got 1.2 million Pennsylvanians that benefit from Obamacare and the funding that the Biden administration has put forth. Why do I cite each of those things? Because those are the very things that Donald Trump says he wants to undo. Those are the very things that he claims aren't helping the good people of Pennsylvania. The good news is President Biden has made those investments. We are benefiting from them. As the Secretary said, we're in the 5th inning or the 4th inning. We're in the middle of this. If they put the brakes on it now, if the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or this country turns the keys over to Donald Trump, someone who wants to eviscerate those investments, you know what that means? It means a lack of health care for over 1 million people. It means we lose out on the prospects of tens of thousands of jobs that we know are going to come because of these investments. It means a whole lot less freedom and opportunity for the good people of Pennsylvania because, of course, we know not only do they want to restrict the investments in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump and his allies do, they also want to restrict our freedoms, whether it's the freedom to marry who you love, the freedom to be able to make decisions over your own body, the freedom to take the medicines you want to take. So therefore, less freedom, less economic opportunity. Now is not a time to go backwards, which is the direction Donald Trump wants to go in. And so when I'm up here as your governor and we're all celebrating the good things we're getting done, all the GSD, all the stuff we're getting done, part of the reason we're able to get that stuff done is because of these federal investments. It'll be harder for me to deliver for the good people of Pennsylvania without the investments that President Biden is making. And so the Secretary may not be able to say it. I'll say it. It'll be a dangerous path if we go backwards to Donald Trump. Less freedom, less opportunity, less jobs, less health care, less economic progress in Pennsylvania.
Okay. We're talking about investments in Pennsylvania. I was wondering, Secretary, is there any money in this pot that you have yet to spend that will be devoted to the I-83 bridge that so many of us travel across every day?
You sound like Josh Shapiro. I've gotten a phone call or two about this from your governor, from your senators and others. What I can tell you, I can't say much because it's in an active process right now, but what I can tell you is we have received applications related to I-83. The governor has communicated how important that is. Our bridge investment program is a program that gets a lot of competition and a lot of applications, but I've committed to the governor and anybody else who calls to make sure that this application and this idea gets every appropriate look because we understand how important it is to the community. All right, thank you.
Good question, Jan. Thank you.
You didn't put her up to that, did you?
Good to be with you.